Hello and welcome to this episode of the GrowVC Everyone Funding Startups podcast. This episode is a little different. It's actually a recording from a recent event held on the standardization of crowdfunding. A vast topic, but its introduction is relevant since the financial sector is in reform and being able to partner up with different players will require that different standards are utilized but also applied across sectors. In this instance, we're talking about XBRL standards that are utilized in the financial and accounting sectors. This event was held in Brussels the 17th and 19th of May 2011, and without further ado, let's listen to the presentation by Jouko Ahvenainen from GrowVC.
I can tell something about our own experiences and also how we see the situation and need for common standard in this area. GrowVC is especially a service for crowdfunding equity investments. So it basically means that people can invest money into companies so that they actually own equity, or it can be also a kind of indirect ownership. But it means that we are not lending service like, for example, Prosper or Kiva, but we are working with equity. And what we also want to do is to make our platform and our service very open so that we could also work together with other services, so that we see that our position is especially to be a kind of marketplace. And for example, then other companies could also develop services on the top of our platform and marketplace. For one example is that they can develop services that can better analyze, for example, data from companies and help in that way in the decision making of the investments. We have actually 3 different models at the moment. These are just examples to give some idea to you that what kind of models they are, so that I don't mean that it must be something like this, but I hope that this can a little bit illustrate about the services. One service what we have is called Community Fund, and it is basically meant for small micro investments, so that you can actually invest $20 or $100 a month into startups. And it happens in that way that we actually aggregate all those investments together, and our investment company make the actual investment based on basically the decision making of the crowd. But it would be very difficult for startup companies basically to manage hundreds or thousands of investors, and that's why we aggregate all these investments together. We have also another investment model that is direct investment, so that basically investors can directly invest into startup companies. But that typically means larger investments, so that it is not $100, but it is at least $10,000 or $100,000 or 1 million, whatever. And if we think the key components what we have from a data point of view in our service, a kind of data object is a funding round, so that company can have open funding round, and there are certain parameters that are linked to this funding round. There are also some business rules that what happens in different situations. For example, what kind of investment proposals are accepted, in which conditions the funding round go for the closing process, and so on. Then another important part is the funding instrument, so that there can be basically different kind of instruments how to make the investment. It can be this our community fund, it can be direct investment, different kind of direct investment, and of course in other services it can be also a loan or something else like for example convertible bond or something like that. There are several instruments that are used in these investments. And then, of course, very important part is the members. So that it basically can mean, in our service, investors and companies, but in some other services it can mean, for example, people who want to lend money and people who want to borrow money, and so on. So that typically these are the main instruments or main components in the service. And then to little bit illustrate, I don't want to go to too many details yet because this is more like a proposal that we must start to work in this area. But if I illustrate some examples that what kind of data components there are. So that, for example, funding round is of course, or lending round is very important main component, and it is linked always to somebody who owns it. In our case it is startup, but if it is lending it can be also somebody who wants to borrow money. Then there are proposals basically to make the investment or lend money, and then there are also different kind of parameters basically to describe this funding round. And if we go a little bit more to details, just to give example that what kind of data components they are. For example, for funding round, there is typically target value, how much money is needed for this investment, also currency, and then there are some additional terms for the investment. Then there is also what kind of investment the company or person is looking for. There can be different kind of limits that, for example, how many investors somebody is looking for, what is the minimum investment, and what is the maximum number of the investors, and so on. And then there is, of course, information on the company that is looking for money, or on the people and companies that are basically ready to invest or lend money. So that this is a kind of big picture, what kind of components, for example, we have in our database. I just have a couple of examples how our service look like to give a little bit more concrete idea that what does it mean. So that I have sometimes said that our service is a kind of combination of a marketplace and social networking service. So that basically there are people, there are companies that have a profile, like for example in Facebook or in another social networking service. But an important component of the service is that there is also a marketplace, so that the company can basically look for funding and basically publish finance data and also tell what kind of investment they are looking for, other terms and conditions, and also tools actually to make the investment process. And to give a little bit more idea that what kind of information, for example, investors and companies that are looking for investment must give in our service, so that they are basically all basic data, also different kind of data to describe the actual business, the location, and also information about the management, and about the key people in the company, and basically a kind of collection of the basic data that is typically needed